Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, and welcome to our third session of our first day of Artlogic Connect 2024. My name is John Duff, the Director of Marketing here at Artlogic, and we are absolutely thrilled that you could join us for this session. We've had over 3,000 registrations for Connect, and the next 3 days are all about creating a space for the art world to come together, spark fresh ideas, and help shape what's next to come as we gear up for 2025. Now, before we get the session started, I'm going to hand over to our President and Chief Commercial Officer, Joe Elliott, for some words. Take it away, Joe.
Thanks so much, John. Well, welcome, first of all, and thank you everyone for joining our first ever art business conference, Artlogic Connect 2024. We've been truly bowled over by the response to Artlogic Connect, with over 3,000 people registering so far. So from all of us here at Artlogic, we want to say a big thank you for coming and joining the conversations this week. We'd really encourage you to get involved. Please do ask questions and feel free to follow up with us after the event. We're here to help any way we possibly can. Personally, I'm very much looking forward to some fascinating and thought-provoking discussions over the next 3 days. And that leads me on to a final thank you to all of our esteemed moderators and panelists, of which we have 40 speakers across 12 different sessions. You guys are ultimately the ones that make this event come to life. We quite literally couldn't do it without you. So a heartfelt thank you to you all. And with that, I'll pass back over to you, John, to kick off our next panel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So for those who are new to Artlogic, we're the platform that's helping to transform the art world, and we've been doing that for 30 years. Since 1994, we partnered with over 5,000 art businesses, and today we work with more than 12,000 users worldwide, empowering galleries, artists, and collectors to help streamline their operations, their sales, and their marketing into one platform. This helps save time, ultimately generate new sales, and it allows everyone to focus on really what matters the most, which is the art. So today's session is Under Pressure, How Small Galleries Compete with Large Enterprises. Before we begin, a few quick housekeeping notes. The session will include the panel discussion, which will last 30 to 45 minutes, and we're going to have a live Q&A section at the end. During the discussion, please do feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A box below. We'll review them and make sure that we can get those over to the panelists during the Q&A section. If you do need to step away at any time or revisit this conversation later, don't worry, as all the sessions are being recorded. They'll be available on demand next week after the conference. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator who will guide us through this exciting discussion. Jeffrey Boloten is the Director of Art Business and Enterprise Programs at Sotheby's Institute of Art and Managing Director of Art Insight Limited, the education partner of Artactic. He's a frequent speaker and lecturer specializing in global art, photography, and art investment markets. Please join me in welcoming Jeffrey. And with that, I'll hand it over to him to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John and Joe, and the entire Artlogic team, who I have to say have put together this really quite impressive and quite groundbreaking series of talks as well. Thank you for inviting us, me and the panel as well, to be participating. I just think it's a very dramatic title, Under Pressure, a small gallery compete with large enterprises. Before I introduce our most fantastic panel, I just want to contextualize this a little bit. As most of the world knows, that there's been no end of talks about the gallery crisis and what's going on in terms of galleries and the challenges and problems that they're facing. We see this all the time and every single day. Maybe the best way of kind of characterizing it is going back to the Basel UBS survey, which is done to 2024 for the 2024 year, to talk about what galleries themselves say are the key challenges that they've been facing, and very much ranked in terms of top to bottom. And I think these are some of the things we really want to talk about today, how these challenges are being kind of coped with and met. So some of the big ones are the political and economic uncertainty, which maybe is probably going to continue. The stagnant market in terms of the art market itself, that it's been kind of plateauing, and that's been a bit of an issue. Art fairs is number 3, and that's something we will be talking about quite a lot. The sort of pressure the art fairs put on galleries and cost and sort of just the efforts as well. And then finally, basically the costs and the rising costs of travel, exhibitions, logistics, rent, all these things, which are getting higher and higher and higher. And I think what's interesting coming from the survey as well is that, coming out of COVID, and we'll talk about sort of how COVID affected galleries and the relationships as well. I think coming out of COVID, there was a kind of a profitability bump, boost in some way for galleries. Maybe not having to go to art fairs, maybe not having to do the travels they did. But that's now being kind of slowly sort of coming off the rails in terms of that profitability. So there is a squeeze very much in terms of the profitability of galleries. I have to say it's on all levels. So today we're going to be talking about a number of things, talking about our gallerists and talking about how their trajectory kind of came about in terms of becoming gallerists, then looking at the idea of the kind of complex relationship, and being kind, between smaller and larger galleries that exist, and also how, what we can do to be kind of altering the art world ecosystem and moving in different directions in terms of the relationships and fairness and just sustainability of all things. So finally, a chance to introduce my most wonderful set of panelists who are working with me today. And I'll start alphabetical order. They are all gallerists who have set up amazing galleries and quite pioneering in their own fashion and way. First of all, Mila Askarova is going to be with us. She's the founder and CEO of Gazelli Art House, which was founded in 2010 in London, and basically expanding from its original base in Azerbaijan, in Baku, and also very much a focus on international artists and digital and new media art more and more as well. Then we have Margot Samel, who is the founder of Margot Samel Gallery in New York, which opened in May 2022, and initially focused on Estonian artists and artists from the Baltic region as well. She's also the co-founder of quite an innovative new venture, which is the Esther Art Fair, which actually just launched in this past May 2024, alongside Frieze in New York, at New York's Estonian House. And finally, Rakeb Sile, who is the co-founder and director of Addis Fine Art, which was co-founded by her and a partner in 2016, and it was basically Ethiopia's first white cube gallery space for modern contemporary art, expanded into an additional project space in London, and has also been very much participating in a large array of prestigious global art fairs as well. So what I want to do, first of all, is start at the beginning and ask each of these wonderful, I keep saying these wonderful gallerists and panelists to kind of talk about the trajectory, where you started, and in terms of how you actually came to starting a gallery. And perhaps maybe just a few of the pitfalls and triumphs at the very start of what you were doing. So Mila, can I ask you to just give us a little potted history?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much to Artlogic, to you, Jeffrey, to having me here. So where do we begin? 2010, I found the gallery. 2011, we did this pop-up shows. 2012, we've settled in our current Mayfair space on Dover Street. We've learned quite a bit over the years we've been kind of operational. And this is the say, second space in Baku aside, because that also brought in, actually fairly recently, probably in the past kind of only a couple of years, it brought in its own kind of dynamic that we're trying to slowly get through. But just specifically, I guess, focusing on the London space, we've started off, with a very kind of somewhat probably naive and delusional ambition of, thinking that it was all about the space, it was all about the location, anything we'd showcase, anything we'd exhibit, any artists we'd work with would, lead to sellout shows. And this was, again, at the time, obviously, pre-COVID, when things were all, dandy and bright. It was, after, I guess, the novelty of the gallery settling in this kind of quite significant space, where Richard Green has been dealing for 15 years prior to us, the novelty probably worn out in terms of the marketing and this excitement and hype around the galleries kind of popping up kind of out of nowhere, fizzled out probably year 2 or year 3 into it. And that's where the real kind of, I guess, concerns kicked in of, okay, well, the hype is over and the figures aren't really, coming through as much as we have hoped for. And again, bearing in mind back then, our main, I guess, program was more or less kind of geared towards, younger artists, less established artists. And it was very much kind of driven by I guess, our interest on various kind of mediums, various nationalities. So, which I'm sure we'll go into later on as well, the need for whether it's younger, mid-sized galleries or just new galleries looking at opening up today, the need for them to specialize in a certain kind of direction. Because for us, we just went in at it, very wide angled. And then come year 3, we I guess slowly, started kind of shifting things just to make things work for us. And in 2015, which was an interesting kind of shift, in around 2015-16, we've launched our Gazelli residency program, which was focused on bringing digital artists or bringing light to digital art practice. And that was, which is still ongoing now. In July, we've celebrated our 100th resident artist through that program. It is an online residency which fed into the physical program in the space in the form of a group show. So we started hosting, and this is back then, again, pre-NFTs, pre-whole kind of crypto scene. We started hosting VR-specific exhibitions, enter through the headset. Again, financially, this was a complete loss. It never made any money for us, but it was a kind of keen interest that I think has started paying out in only the past 2-3 years. So that was one thing that happened for us, which kind of started, I guess, organically positioning the gallery within the market as its own, having its own voice, which I think was quite important and is still for any gallery. And then also in the meantime, we kind of went backwards and started showcasing some historical curated exhibitions. So we pick certain movements, be it California Light and Space movement or East Coast ABEX kind of 9th Street Club related artists, a bit of kind of bringing Azeri modern artists into the mix as well. So just basically kind of older artists, more, I guess, those that had a bit more of a name. And that also started shifting things for us on a financial level from only about 2020. So it took us 4 or 5 years of this programming to actually see any kind of, any kind of financial gain in a way. So I guess the question arises is how do you keep, a gallery running for a period of 5 to 10 years, which is a long time, a long run, without necessarily getting into profit. At least that has been our kind of experience.
Right. I want to get back to the, to the sort of early beginnings as well. But Margot, you don't have to worry about the 10-year point yet. What were you doing? What were you doing before you were sort of at the gallery, and how did that all happen?
Hello, I'm Margot. Thank you so much, Jeffrey and Artlogic and fellow panelists. But yeah, so I'm originally from Estonia and I moved to Glasgow, Scotland almost 20 years ago now. And I initially went there to study art history. And then I started working for a nonprofit gallery, Washington Garcia, and the Lighthouse, which was a design museum. So yeah, my kind of career in a way sort of started off from more nonprofit side of things. And yeah, honestly, I never really imagined myself working in a commercial gallery. And I distinctly remember telling my friend Kendall Koppe, when his gallery transitioned from a nonprofit to a for-profit, that I'd be happy to help him for a few months leading up to the opening of his gallery, but I would never work in a commercial gallery myself. So yeah, and I'm not really sure what changed, but it was probably just sort of like getting to see and learn more about the art world in Glasgow, but also outside of Glasgow, mostly through art fairs initially, and then establishing a community both in the city where I lived, but also on an international level. And yeah, I also worked at the Modern Institute and then at Cape Robo Gallery when I moved to New York. And I think for me, it was just really helpful kind of leading up to the opening of my own space to have worked in both smaller galleries and bigger galleries, and just sort of seeing the differences in how galleries operate on a small and large scale definitely helped me in terms of trying to figure out which elements I could apply to my own business. So yeah.
Great, thank you, thank you. And finally, Rakeb, where did you come from before Addis Fine Art?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Jeffrey and Artlogic and my fellow panelists for having me here. I come actually from outside of the art world completely. I was a management consultant working in business pretty much for 15 years prior to setting up Addis Fine Art. My interest in art came really from the artists themselves. I mean, myself and Masai Halalu'u, co-founder of Addis Fine Art, we actually really came together around the artists and around the fact that a lot of the artists that we worked for were completely invisible to the outside market. So we're both from Ethiopia originally, and we both collected in our own lives prior to meeting each other. But once we met, we realized that actually there were artists in Ethiopia that were world-class, that had had an incredible education from the Ali School of Fine Art and Design in Ethiopia, and that really had there was no platforms really or ecosystems on the ground to allow them to be seen, transition, and compete in the art world at large. So our mission was actually very specific, and I think Mila, Margot, you both talked about, I think Mila, you said you talked about going wide and coming back into a very specific USP, if you like. But we really had a very specific mission to ensure Ethiopian artists that we knew and loved had a platform to thrive, compete, and flourish. And it was a very, I mean, we could have started a nonprofit like you, Margot, or anything else in between, to be fair, because the ecosystem on the ground really doesn't exist. But I think we were both very convicted that the business case needed to be proved. You know, these artists really needed support to compete in the market rather than to be seen as a nonprofit kind of enterprise, because they were able to compete, we thought, in terms of their work.
That's great, and that's something that I want to pick up on. I think what all three have in common in a way is when you started out, it was quite a niche that you were sort of focusing on, a geographic niche in all these cases in some way. And then, you know, for whatever reasons, you then sort of, it shifted and changed and refocused afterwards. Was starting out as someone starting at a gallery, do you think having that specific niche was a benefit? Was that something that kind of was helpful and, you know, sort of differentiated you? All of you can answer that.
Sure. I think for us, absolutely. I mean, that is our guiding mission. It's taken us through. I mean, we're an 8-year-old gallery. We'll be actually 9 next month, so it's almost a decade. And that guiding light, the principle that we kind of started off in the beginning, has helped us navigate all manner of ups and downs locally in Ethiopia, where we have our flagship space, but also in the fairs and in our London spaces. We've had 2 iterations of that space in London, because it hasn't been smooth sailing, right? So we've had to pivot every time. We've had to be super nimble. We've had to do things very differently in order to survive this long, to be honest. And one of the things, and I was thinking about this while we were talking, because Artlogic is a very interesting company for us, because before we opened our physical space, we were very convicted that we would open a kind of an online presence, and we thought, okay, who's the best in class, you know, website and supporters to galleries. And the first thing we did as a business was purchase an Artlogic website, and that actually led to us being known a little bit more before we opened, and it led to our very first fair participation, which happened to be the Armory show, and we were only 6 weeks old as a gallery when we participated in that fair, which was really unprecedented, but also quite a risk, really, because we had to spend a lot of money. As we know, these fairs cost so much, but we made that investment, and it really put us on the map. So we've had to really be bold. We've had to take lots of risks. We've had to be nimble. We've had to change. We've just closed our London gallery this year in August because we thought that that was the right thing to do. So I think having a unique selling point and having a real focus really has helped us survive for sure.
Do you agree, Mila and Margot? I mean, was that more of a help than a hindrance, of being quite niche and focused on what you were doing?
I think for me, it was also a big part of just justifying the reason for opening up a gallery in New York, because for me, for the longest time, I just felt like the last thing New York needs is another gallery. And knowing that at the time, there weren't any Estonian artists who had any representation, not just in New York, but in the US in general, and only a very few artists from the Baltics in general had any visibility in the US. It kind of just seemed like a major gap that needed to be filled. And yes, so it kind of I don't know how many people really think of, my gallery and like in terms of the major focus being artists from the Baltics, but I think for myself it's a really important sort of task to kind of keep my focus on. So yeah.
Right. Mila?
First of all, I admire you ladies so much. Well done for doing what you're doing in your own little ways. I think for us, well, that's precisely it, right? We didn't start up with that unique kind of angle, and a lot of people, I remember at the time when we've just opened, they were like, "Well, you're from," and this was because we've opened the Baku space in 2012 as well. But over the years, again, it ran a very separate kind of exhibition program because it's a little slower on the market front out there, and it was a huge learning curve for me just generally to be able to, I guess, suss out the differences between these two audiences, two very different marketplaces, kind of cultural sensitivities. Even though I'm from there, it still was, I think, something to kind of adapt to the kind of work we're showing out there. And anyways, all these years it ran as very separate program. And like I said, only about 2 years ago did we start making kind of a conscious decision of bridging the two galleries together, because I think this is finally out. I think we're ready from the London's end to bring in the Baku angle that possibly obviously other galleries in London don't have. But to begin with, we were it definitely served against us, because there was a massive kind of identity crisis that we kept on facing time and time again. And I think it kind of not hit home, but my breaking point on the 10th year anniversary was not where are we going, because in my mind, there has always been a certain kind of vision. It may or may not have been picked up by the kind of outside world or kind of from an external perspective, but in my mind there was always a link. One show would lead to another, one artist on our kind of represented page, if you like, would there are links that are apparent to me, but clearly it wasn't, I think, it wasn't a focused enough beginning for us for it to be, I think, communicated to the audiences in a clear way where they immediately said, "Oh, Gazelli, I know this gallery. It does that," or it's associated with these artists. Only now, again, as I said, 5 years, 6 years into it, within this digital realm, are we kind of getting a name perhaps within that circle, and this was also, this was coupled with a few artists that have come into our kind of roster of artists, specifically within the digital realm. For example, it's Harold Cohen's estate, which again was one of the first few estates that we've started working with in the past few years only. And that for us kind of linked this historical angle of the program with the kind of cutting edge digital. So I think the USP, I mean, yes, it is, I think, important to have that from day one. It will definitely niche, you will definitely be positioned, I think, from day one, and you can stick to it. In my mind, though, I mean, is it, further, it might make it an easier start, but come year 5, year 10, year 15, hopefully into it, would that serve as a kind of limitation because this is the only thing that you're known for? And that's where I think it needs to be kind of carefully considered. Because if it's like a long-term game for you, right, as any gallerist out there or budding gallerist out there, if it's a long-term game where you're like, this is it, this is all I've got in my life, I'm going to dedicate my life to it, right? And hopefully 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, I'd still do what I'm doing. You then start, I guess, thinking, you know, can you sing the same song for 20, 30 years? And what would that look like? Because you can definitely just do that. But you know,
Mila, if you don't mind, because we're time limited, but I really want to continue this discussion. But in relation to one of the big topics of what we really want to be talking about, which is the idea of larger galleries and sort of that relationship. So we can get into this meaty subject now. And just to contextualize that, I think that everyone understands that a small gallery relationship with larger galleries is kind of like a symbiotic relationship in some way. It's not like, you know, one can do without the other. You know, the bigger galleries rely on the smaller galleries to do the heavy lifting with younger artists and younger collector bases. But there's also, you know, issues that result from that, as well as you all experienced. And I wonder, and I think in our discussion we had sort of a few days ago was the idea that COVID was kind of like the benchmark point that changed things to some degree in that relationship. And as you all guys said, you know, there was this incredible feeling of coming together and cooperating during COVID, where galleries were, you know, sort of were sharing online platforms. There was London Gallery Weekend, the Gallery Climate Coalition came about, and all that stuff. Do all of you or any of you think that sort of spirit of cooperation has extended, or is it difficult? And what are the sort of initiatives you see that can make that better? That's a big question. I know who wants to start on that one.
I can start on that one.
Great.
So I think for us, we've always had to collaborate, especially with colleagues on the continent. So we've done collaborations with, say, Circle Art Agency in Kenya and AfriArt in Uganda. We've shared booths and so on. So we've always thought of ourselves as kind of a collaborative gallery. And when we had our space here in London in Fitzrovia on East Castle Street, we did a lot of shows inviting galleries into our space from the continent to showcase and to kind of collaborate in that way. So when we first started, that's what I thought would be the atmosphere, but really it wasn't until COVID, as you say, when bigger galleries or even medium-sized galleries were willing to collaborate rather than poach. So there's a big difference, right? So collaborating is about ensuring the founding gallery is also taken care of, that the gallery is also able to thrive, and also kind of being able to take a piece of the pie so that they can carry on doing the work that they do. Whereas I think prior to COVID, or at least our experience was that as soon as an artist is discovered or is hot, basically the bigger galleries will swoop in and take that gallery. Now, that model was so alien to me, coming from other businesses, from the other business world, because that just means that the art world is cannibalizing downwards, right? So the smaller galleries really don't have the economic might to, stop that kind of practice. But also, it's not really good for the rest of the ecosystem, because the smaller galleries or the niche galleries like ours, we will always remain small, and therefore our margins will always remain small. Because we're investing in new artists, we are actually the investment engine of the whole ecosystem, I would say. So I thought there would have been a better mechanism already in this industry to ensure not just the survival, but like the fact we want to thrive. We just don't want to survive. I mean, nobody goes into business to survive. We want to thrive and make sure that we are here. So that mechanism wasn't there, and I don't think it's still not thought through in the wider sense. There isn't like a best practice necessarily that we can adhere to, but certainly what I'm finding now is bigger galleries, blue chip galleries, are more willing to have a conversation, sit down and talk about co-representation. Even though it seems asymmetric, it is financially very asymmetric. My argument is that what we bring also is something that's super valuable, and that bigger galleries really can't do without, in terms of cultural knowledge, curatorial knowledge, local knowledge, or even just knowledge of the artists themselves and just their quirks and what makes them work and what makes them, what makes their practice special.
And I think what's interesting as well, and I want Mila and Margot to respond to that as well, but focusing maybe on the art fairs as well. I think there have been initiatives like Frieze Art Fair in London this year decided to put all the small galleries at the beginning, at the front, sort of to sort of change that, shake up that sort of hierarchy in some way, and maybe this idea of sharing space as well. But Margot, you as a founder of an art fair as well, do you see that, are these changes going to be helpful in terms of the relationship with smaller and larger galleries?
Yeah, I mean, I opened up my gallery in 2022, so I don't really have firsthand experience of pre-COVID in terms of running a smaller gallery, but I'm definitely seeing a bit of a shift in terms of artist representation and larger galleries starting to sort of recognize the work of smaller galleries, or at least maybe they are more under pressure to recognize it as well. And I feel like, yeah, I started an art fair together with Olga Temnikova from Temnikova and Gazelli Gallery in just earlier this year in May. And yeah, for us, it kind of all started with the space, and we didn't know if it was going to be an art fair or an exhibition. But when we did decide it was going to be an art fair, we wanted it to be a place where, you don't go in and it doesn't feel like there's different sections, or this is a small gallery, this is where small galleries go. We wanted it to feel just like you're walking around Tribeca and there are smaller galleries and bigger galleries and large galleries where we're kind of, there's no distinction. Also, like, you're not setting up galleries to almost like fail in the basement or in the back, or like it felt very organic. And even like the galleries themselves were not divided by, or the booths were not divided by walls. There was a lot of sharing in general, but yeah. And it was a mixture, it was mostly peers, whether it was kind of younger galleries like myself or galleries that have been in business for 15 to 20 years. But it felt very organic in a way that I wish the art world did in general. But yeah.
Great. Mila, and over your time in terms of collaboratory activity with larger galleries, has that shifted? Has it changed? Is it getting more collaborative?
Yeah, I guess so. I think it boils down to artists, right? Artists, projects, and again, that kind of, what are we bringing to the bigger kind of conversation, the bigger, market, basically. What's our purpose as galleries generally, regardless of size? I think in terms of conversations, absolutely. I mean, it's again, the longer you're around, I think the more obviously of a trust element there is from all sides, right? Be it artists, collectors, other galleries, and you really start seeing, I think, the significance of your exchanges with your, colleagues, your peers. I think with, what it boils down to is probably just relationships as well, in a sense. If you do what you're doing, if you're focusing on whatever your focus is within this kind of industry, and you're being truthful or being your authentic self with, again, the purpose that you're doing something, I think sooner or later it should, kind of pay for it. You should kind of reap the benefits out of it. If you treat everyone with respect, you don't, I think it's just like certain basic kind of human qualities that are very, kind of very entrenched in our world. That's what I think kind of stands the test of time in a way. But yeah, post-COVID, I think I've mentioned this when we chatted before, is for us, we definitely have seen kind of the numbers change. But this was obviously because of, we've massively reduced our costs, our exhibition costs, our shipping, storage costs, the usual thing that every gallery kind of faces. It's just a matter of maintaining this slight little glimpse of hope that we're having right now, the light at the end of the tunnel, and how do we maintain that rather than run the business from a sale to a sale,
Right. In terms of the idea of co-representation, which seems to be happening more and more, and I think we were talking when we were discussing this, the idea that it actually is a great model in the sense that the artist is getting kind of two different support mechanisms. One is sort of nurturing one, or a more personal one, maybe, or day-to-day one, and one is sort of like opening up bigger markets. Do you think that those relationships are strong and they're going to be go forward, or are they sort of are they consequential in terms of where the gallery models are headed? Any of you?
I think I just want to pick up one Mila said. I think the relationship aspect of this industry is undeniable for sure. It's about, I mean, even the relationship with the artist is central, obviously, but relationship with your collectors, relationship with other galleries is now another big thing. I think for us, definitely forging relationships with bigger galleries that we think are suitable for particular types of artists has been really a central piece of work that we've been doing over the last 18 months, because there are artists now that really do need bigger markets and do need to graduate and so on. But the worry is that maybe these artists might get lost in that, because the blue chip galleries have hundreds of artists on their roster. And again, if we're trying to be artist centric, just letting them go into that kind of melee may not be the right thing for them anyway, because they might not be able to navigate. So there are a lot of other support. As you say, the nurturing piece is still very important to us. But also, we don't want to see all of the work that we've done go to waste, right? So we want to make sure that the artist is going to be a go forward for whoever gallery takes them on. So those relationships are really key. We've been bringing gallery owners to Ethiopia to see kind of where our artists work and so on, and doing a lot of work on education, on art history, on the Addis School of Fine Art, so that as the artist goes to wherever they go to, that gallery also has a real understanding of the context and where they come from, and they're not seeing them as just an individual artist. I mean, because our mission really is about a kind of a collective art history of that region, not just Ethiopia, but just those related countries around there too, because that art history hasn't been told, and it needs to be elevated, it needs to be studied, it needs to be brought to the wider public. And we really look for galleries and gallerists that really try to understand that this isn't just about that one individual artist only. It's about it's a wider story that we want them to respect and take forward. So you're right, those relationships are really, really important. What I find difficult is that there isn't a very straightforward commercial mechanism. Those have to be negotiated constantly with every single gallery. But really, this industry really, I feel, should have some sort of commercial, best-in-class, easy, that everybody knows what it is, mechanism to ensure younger niche galleries, or galleries that just want to do work that we want to do, are also compensated for the work that they've done or that they do going forward. So I think from a business perspective, I find that slightly difficult, but relationships are super key. And I think post-COVID, these conversations, at least for me, have been much better and easier to handle.
So there's one good thing coming out of COVID. That was it. Margot, do you have anything to add in terms of the co-representation model? Do you think that is something that's very positive for the future, or do you think it's something that's going to make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I feel like I've done a lot of collaborations this year. Like my last 2 shows, really, or everything I did this summer was essentially a collaboration. Not necessarily with much bigger galleries, but galleries whose program I really have been admiring for, a long time, even before I opened up my own space. And I feel like, just like what we say to a lot of artists in terms of like, when somebody just moves to New York, and like, how do you get shows? How do you get into even just like group shows? And getting to show your work. It's all about finding your community, and for us it's galleries. And yeah, I feel like I haven't really been asked to collaborate with, a much bigger gallery than myself,
But you're open to it.
in terms of like artists, yeah, there's quite a few galleries who have reached out and are about to do solo and group exhibitions with some of my artists. And I feel like I have been in a really lucky place in terms of them actually approaching me first and asking for an introduction versus just poaching the artist. But maybe that is also telling that, I did just open up the space 2 years ago, and maybe things are slightly shifting in the right direction. But yeah.
Good. We're running out of time. I want to ask one last fundamental question. And this is something, Rakeb, I'm going to borrow your phraseology. We were talking about it when we had our conversation before. And the fact when you hear these conversations about, what are the gallery crises happening, and basically how can galleries cope, or how can galleries survive? And we all felt that was a, incredibly depressing low bar of where our goal is, just to cope or just to survive. And the idea, as Rakeb, you said, the idea of, how can small galleries thrive, not just, just exist in some way. Do any of you or all of you have one idea in terms of maybe a fundamental change that you could see that would bring about that sort of, bigger chance for small galleries, even if it's a shift in the way that the art ecosystem works?
I think this is a question for the whole industry as a whole. We all have to put our minds together. Really, to really fix what I believe is a broken commercial system, right? Because I think if you look at impact, impact should eventually lead to financial gain or sustainability at least, right? So we want, if you're making lots of impact as whatever gallery, big, small, niche, your effort should kind of make sure that you reap some reward so you can keep your business going, and that the work that you're doing, your impact work, is sustainable. I don't necessarily think it's like that in this industry. I think the margins for young galleries are so low, and then the margins for big galleries are so big because we have a commercial model that kind of equalizes just on percentages, but actually on real terms, margins are very small at the low end and really high at the high end. So I don't necessarily have a holistic answer. It's just that I think that we should continue talking about this, and everybody from the biggest galleries to the smallest galleries and everybody in between really needs to come together and figure out, what kind of artwork we want in the future. And of course, there are lots of things that, say, art fairs can do. The Frieze, I think, made a really good start, but actually the commercial model, I think, Margot, you mentioned, and I looked it up, is that per square foot, we actually pay the same, right, in most of these fairs. So that really should be something that is, I'd say, easy to fix. A fair should, for the very best galleries that are making the best impact, be able to subsidize it. Just subsidized booths, not just tiny booths that we're paying the same for, but just subsidized booths, things like that. But also when these collaborations, kind of asymmetric collaborations, happen with a niche gallery, with a really big gallery, there should be a commercial model that kind of ensures sustainability for that smaller gallery. Because without that gallery, whatever artist that is coming into the ecosystem would not have been there. So there needs to be some sort of idea that we all agree on as an industry. Okay, this is how it works, because then it makes it easy for everybody. We know what our commercial model is. We know if we bring something to the table, this is how much we're going to get, and then we can plan that in.
And just to recognize the unequal margins and to compensate for it somehow.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, because we are investing, right? When you're bringing new artists into the world, not the world, but into the mainstream, you are actually investing. You're doing a lot of financial support to get their career to a certain level, and most of the money that you make goes back into that. As they get into higher and higher price points increase. And then the bigger galleries have all of the main high earning gallery artists in their roster anyway. So the margins that they make on those are huge, right? So it's hugely asymmetric. It's hugely asymmetric. And I think we should talk about it. Just one stat that might illustrate this. 80% of all business is done by 10% of our businesses. So the rest of us, we are in that 20% category, and we're all fighting for that 20% of actually a very small industry. The industry is only 70 billion in revenue per year, just about. So it's like we're in a small space. So I think there's a lot that we all need to think about. These types of forums are incredibly important, and we should all be able to speak freely about sustainability of the industry, which means sustainability of younger galleries and young artists as well.
Great. Before we move into questions, Margot and Mila, do you have any wish list point to add, no matter how provocative and wonderful it might be? What could change? What do you think could change?
I think what's interesting as well to just note is the relationship from the artist to the whole system as well, post-COVID, I guess, or in this kind of active digital, savvy age we live in a sense of, if artists are quite successful at getting a direct kind of relationship, and they're actively building on direct relationships with their clients, with their marketplace, or not marketplace, but with their own market, let's say, the intermediaries such as galleries are, their function is questioned. And I think we need to have that honest kind of conversation and keep each other in check, not only kind of as peer-to-peer, gallery to gallery, but also with the artists themselves. Because some artists rather are they question that kind of exclusive representation. And at the end of the day, I guess the way to tackle that kind of discrepancy is it is an exclusive, in a way, control that galleries have over inventory, right? The clients or collectors, searching for specific artists, they know that it's only you that have got access to it. So that's when you as a gallerist can kind of influence or impact, hopefully, the market prices and the growth over the years to come. But in the absence of that, when artists are, and this goes back to the previous point about co-representation, whether it's relevant, whether it's needed nowadays, again, back then, back in the day when it was all region specific, yes, it made sense. Nowadays, it's I think and I know the next panel you've got is on artists agency that Artlogic has got, is on artist agents and agency as a model. And I think there's something that we can incorporate or adapt to that as far as the model goes, just to be mindful of basically what the artist, what the priorities of the artists are nowadays in light of, the times we live in, I guess.
Right. Margot, any final word on changing the universe?
Yes, a lot. But yeah, I mean, I agree with both Mila and Rakeb. And I was actually curious, Rakeb, are you thinking that in terms of, are you suggesting that, for example, if an artist was co-represented by two galleries, and the second gallery being a bigger gallery, and a percentage from sales would potentially go back to the original gallery, for example? Is that what you are suggesting? Because I feel like this is something that has come up through quite a few conversations that I've more recently, and I really just mean like this year, that I've had with sort of smaller and medium-sized galleries. And I think it's a really interesting thought that hasn't really, obviously there's consignments, but like if it is co-representation and both galleries are working directly with an artist, could that ever actually, become a standard? And I'm not talking about like a 10% consignment, but like could be it could even just be like a 1% that could make a huge difference for one gallery,
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about. There isn't an industry standard, so we're actually making it up as we go along. And in each conversation that we're having to start from scratch on all of this type of stuff. Okay, so what I'm saying is actually there could be an opportunity where we say, okay, look, this is all the work that we've done. We've invested, I don't know, $500,000 up until now to these artists. This is what we've done. We've got them from here to here. And this is what we were looking for from you as gallery number X. You know, you're going to take them to this level. But we're looking for a percentage on sales for this long. You know, that these are conversations that we're having all the time, but we start from scratch from the beginning for every single one of them. So
you think there could be an industry standard that's developed that makes sense?
There could be an industry. I mean, we talk, the 10% gets thrown around all the time. You know, clients want 10% off, galleries, you know, that 10% seems to be kind of the industry standard, but is it, you know, is it commensurate? Is it the right thing? These are questions still that are not answered. But absolutely, if you're going to do a co-representation with another gallery, you should be able to take a percentage of sales that they're making, and they should take a percentage that you're making, and have a mechanism whereby both galleries are sustainable. And on top of that, you're probably providing a continuous service anyway by supporting the artist, by ensuring correct communication and whatever it is, because you know the artist well in comparison. So I think all of these things are up for grabs now. And I think we need to learn a bit more from other industries, you know, the fashion industry or
sports,
you know, sports or thing, you know, even music industry is very corrupt, but because the artists don't really get paid. But I think there are other examples that we can look to in terms of collaboration, but also brand partnerships, you know.
We're gonna have to get down. I think we do have some questions that are probably burning through the screen. John, if you can.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, fascinating discussion. Brilliant. We do have a few questions that's come in. So the number one that has been asked is, where do you see your gallery in 5 years?
Can I take this?
Any volunteers?
Picture this. No, we want to open up a space, a third space, and then we'll be super happy. Third space, I can't make it public just yet, but I think I might as well. But we're hoping to be in the US, and I think if that happens, or when it happens, we're good. As far as our model goes, we just, in terms of kind of this regional representations, I guess, US is a missing link for us. So ideally in the next 5 years, we're rocking it in, say, East Coast, London, and Baku. That is my vision. I'm manifesting it. Please manifest it with me.
I'm more about short-term goals. I'm like trying to get until the end of this year, and then I like to program really far out, but I don't know. For me, I've only been in business for 2 years, and I'm still, and I hope that excitement will not go away. I'm so excited about just growing with the artists and with people who are working at the gallery, that I don't like to make like sweeping sort of big statements. Not that I thought your goal was at all, Mila. But yeah, I'm just sort of very, very focusing on the program, and I feel like I don't want to grow too fast. And I feel like if there's something that I've learned from a lot of galleries that I've really have been admiring for a long time, some of them have recently closed, is that there's just a lot of galleries that have been trying to grow way too fast, and a lot of them have a lot of pressure to do it as well, like outside pressure from collectors, especially from artists who are, sometimes, maybe they're also working with a bigger gallery or could be working with a bigger gallery, but instead have decided to stay with their original gallery, and they are just expecting them to grow too fast. So yeah, I'm not doing that.
And Rakeb?
So I think we're in another transition phase. I think what I've seen is that every 3 years our gallery has gone through some sort of transition, be it opening a gallery in London. We've just closed our gallery in London, our permanent space. And I think what we want to do now in the next 5 years is go back to our original mission, which was to be the advocate for the artist. So again, these collaborations that we're talking about are really interesting in the last 18 months because actually we see our role more like an artist liaison, artist development gallery, and that larger galleries or galleries with more reach are seeing that benefit of working with a gallery like ours, where we really give deep expertise in the artists and where they come from and all of that, and be able to take our expertise and our help and then take the artist to the next level. So I guess we go back to our roots, do much more on the continent. We're working on a nonprofit as well. So Margot, it's very interesting. You talked about, nonprofit gallery to profit gallery and vice versa. We're working on a nonprofit project at the moment, which hasn't really been announced yet. So that hopefully, and that will be on the continent too, in East Africa. So that is where I see our, it's still not 100% defined, but more artist advocacy, more ability to build ecosystems really on the ground, because that's what's going to give us longevity in the long run. There's really so much to do on the ground.
Well, but we're getting a bunch of exclusives from the Q&A. Brilliant. We're running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to have to end it on one question, which is, what is the one piece of advice would you give to someone in the art world who wants to open an art gallery? And Mila, should we start with you?
Sure. I'd be very kind of, unspecific, I guess, or maybe specific, I don't know. But basically, it's decide on what you're bringing to the table, to the fairly saturated kind of world. Figure out a business plan, at least or where the funds will be coming from if there are no sales at all, at least for 5 years. And then just hope for the best and just keep it going, keep consistent, whatever the format, whatever, even if without the space, you can still, have creative ways to be a gallerist without necessarily a physical space. So hope for the best, but yeah, never, don't let the vision get disrupted.
Margot?
Just still looking for that button. Yeah, I mean, I was basically going to say what Mila just said. So, I mean, finding your voice and just trying not to compromise, at least not too much in the first year. And it's interesting what you said, Mila, about making a business plan. I actually kind of discourage people to make a business plan. I feel like I had to make one because I took a loan, and putting together a business plan almost made me not want to open up my own gallery because the numbers already back then didn't add up. So yeah, it is important to know where you're at when you're opening up, or when you're about to open up your own business. But I feel like it's also, I mean, it's not us. That's, coming back to what we've been talking about. It's not a very sustainable business running a small gallery, but I feel like that's why all the galleries just have to be a little bit delusional and have that energy to really, and excitement, like it's very important for the people who you're presenting the work to, but also, for our artists. So that's it.
Thanks. And Rakeb?
Yeah, so I'd like to echo that. So really stay fixed on your vision. That's what's going to keep you going. So, don't compromise on your North Star, but you have to remain flexible on the details. So how you get there has to be really flexible, because there's going to be things that are going to come your way that you just won't anticipate. So stay flexible, stay nimble, stay willing to change direction if required, as long as your vision doesn't falter. But the second thing is really build your community. So that could be anything from, who are your clients? Who are the people that are going to buy from you every show? Who are the people that are willing to invest in your artist, invest in your story? I mean, we had to do a business plan because we actually raised finance in 2019. So 3 or 4 years into the gallery's business, we raised money from a collector. So that came from building community and being really, really steadfast on the North Star and kind of what we wanted to achieve, but also just being able to be very nimble and flexible. So stay really tight on your vision, but flexible on how you get there.
Wonderful. And Jeffrey, do you have any advice?
Gosh. I think it is. I think, you know, whenever I'm running course and we have galleries coming in, there's always a sort of sense of woe of, oh, you know how difficult it is and not. But then the question is, would you do it again? And it's absolutely yes. And I think it's about the passion. And I don't think you need to forego earning a living at the same time. And you know, but I think that passion is the thing that will take you over the line. And I think that, as Margot says, you can't really plan for those things. They just are part of the art world ecosystem, which is a very network and a very people place. And I think you have to put your faith in the fact that that will carry you if you carry your passion. So that's a lovely way to stop, isn't it?
That's a brilliant way to end. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And a real special thank you to our moderator, Jeffrey, and our amazing panelists, Margot, Mila, and Rakeb. It's been a fascinating discussion. I've definitely taken a lot away from this. It's been wonderful to learn more about your galleries, your history, your programs. Thank you, everybody, for joining. If you have time, our next session starts in an hour. It's on power shifts from gallery representation to artist-driven success, where we'll examine the evolving role of galleries and how artists are leveraging digital platforms to disrupt traditional power structures within the art market. Once again, thank you so much to our panelists. It's been an absolutely amazing discussion, and we hope to see you in some upcoming sessions. So thank you all.